I want to go to our panel here to talk this through. We got Andrew Weissman, lead prosecutor for Robert Mueller's team. Danya Perry serves as the deputy chief of the Southern District New York Criminal Division and as deputy New York Attorney General. Charles Coleman is a civil rights attorney, served as a prosecutor in the Brooklyn District Attorney's Office. It's great to have you all here. There are a million statements coming in a million different directions. I want to sort of focus on two here. Let's just start. I'll give you the short version of the Trump response. There's a very, very long response. But the first thing he wrote was that he had been indicated. These thugs and radical left monsters have just indicated the 45th president of the United States of America and the leading Republican candidate by far of the 2024 nomination for president. This is an attack on our country, the likes of which has never been seen before. It is likewise a continuing attack on our once free and fair elections. USA now a third world nation, a nation in serious decline. So sad. And I should say this theme is played out throughout Republican responses. Putting that aside for a moment, your reaction to the news.
Let's just pick up on the part about the rule of law and how we're seeing in other countries, which Donald Trump sort of played up, which is quite the contrary. We are an aberration. We're seeing many sort of so-called first world countries where political leaders are held to account, whether they are political leaders at the time or former political leaders. They don't have our Department of Justice rule that you can't indict a sitting president. You have Benjamin Netanyahu right now, who's under indictment for corruption charges. I think this puts us in the mainstream of the rule of law. Someone was asking me how I felt about this, and I felt very much the same day when I heard that Robert Mueller was being appointed to be the special counsel, and I thought, whatever happens, I didn't think I would be part of it at the time. I was thinking this is a testament to the rule of law, which was so much under attack. Obviously, we've witnessed what's happened since then. I actually think Donald Trump, when he was president, learned how to use the system the same way he had used the civil law system to manipulate results, and he could easily do that as the president. We saw that by the use of pardons, the way that he helped his friends and hurt his foes. And I think today is a step in the right direction in terms of the rule of law, where he's being held to account and will have all of the rights of a criminal defendant. And that means also people should be aware it's going to take quite some time, because part of that means he has the right to discovery, to make motions. All of that is something that comes with it. For the people who are saying this is a great day because he's being held to account, they need to understand the other part of that, which is, all of us know, is something that goes with the rule of law.
As it
should. You know, Chris, when I look at that statement or listen to it, the thing that jumps out at me is the notion of status. And when I say status, it works in very different ways. He made reference to his status in a number of different places. The 45th president, someone who is currently the leading by far Republican candidate. And the reason he's doing that is because he wants to still hold on to the myth that because I am these things and have this status, I should be treated differently. And that's part of what all of America is seeing does not hold. But it's important to understand that we as Americans are about to get a front row seat into how status actually plays out when you see these things take place. Let's be clear, Donald Trump is no regular defendant. He does have resources that the average person is not going to have. And as Andrew just alluded to, there are going to be a number of legal maneuvers throughout this entire process, even with this little case, quotation marks, here in New York, that are going to have him tied up in court on purpose much longer than your average defendant. And that is also a function of status.
And I'll pick up on another point that is kind of baked into those comments, is the irony and the perversity of Donald Trump attacking this prosecution as inconsistent with the rule of law, given the Department of Justice under him and under Bill Barr. You know, to be personal for a moment, but it also, you know, is widely known. I represented Michael Cohen, not in the underlying criminal case, but in the successful bid to get him sprung from prison after he was unlawfully remanded into solitary confinement for daring to publish a book about his experiences with former President Trump. I also represented Michael Avenatti in a very separate matter, weird confluence. And whatever you want to say about him, this was in his federal extortion trial. He was, as a first-time defendant and offender, pre-trial, he was also thrown into solitary confinement. And So again, this was a perversion of the rule of law under the former president. So there's a lot of irony in his statements.
There's an old statement that saying from a Latin American dictator from for my friends anything, for my enemies the law. And we use it a lot with Trump, right? Because that's really kind of the way that he's operated. I want to stay here, though, on this point, because I think this is really important for people watching this right now and sort of making way of this. This point about what the rule of law means, which has really kind of been the nub of the whole question of Donald Trump from the very beginning, right? From the lock her up stuff, right? From like all this, like, what does this mean? What does it cash out to, that phrase we use? And I think the point here about what that means and how it cashes out here is that A, he is innocent until proven guilty, and he does have constitutional rights as a defendant. B, we don't know what the case is.
Right.
But it also might not be a strong case. I just don't know. And if it isn't, then he should beat it. I mean, like, that to me is an important part of this. I mean, John Edwards got prosecuted by the, Obama Justice Department and was acquitted. Robert Menendez, a sitting U.S. senator, was indicted and prosecuted. He was acquitted. Now, those are people who have way more resources than your average defendant getting arraigned and booked in Brooklyn or Manhattan, right? But it's also the case that this has happened before. The idea that Rachel made this point, Rachel Maddow, it's happened in our country, not to former presidents, but to very powerful political leaders. It's happened to former leaders in other countries. The point of the rule of law, where it cashes out, is the process is what matters here.
Right, you're exactly right. And the process is the process. And people need to understand that it is a critical point for viewers to understand. This is going to be a very long and extracted process. And let's be clear, as you've already said, the indictment has not been unsealed yet. Yeah, we literally do not know what he's been charged with, right? And so it could be as straightforward as just simply the falsified bookkeeping. It could be much more convoluted and complicated when you're talking about the potential campaign finance violations and how that sort of has to be put together. But it's very clear that by no means, even as there is an indictment sitting and waiting for Donald Trump, this is not going to be an open shut process. I do not expect any plea. I do not expect his team to take any plea. And so now you're talking about the potential of a very long, drawn out process leading up with a trial of a former president of the United States of America. That is not an easy thing to deal with. And you're talking about Alvin Bragg, just trying to wrap my mind around finding a jury that is fair and impartial. As a former prosecutor, it makes my head explode in New York, in Manhattan. I think
like, have you heard of the defendant?
Are you from? Is anybody?
But so this is where originalists, like, no. When this country was founded, you had defendants who knew everyone.
That's true.
And the jurors knew them. That's not what the law is. The law is not that you don't know the person or you don't know.
Sure.
It's just, can you put that aside? Yes. And I have done a slew of high-profile cases, obviously nothing like this, but cases where people have heard everything about it. We did Enron in Houston.
Yeah.
And you know what? Jurors are really good. First, there's a huge process to weed out people who have made up their mind, who are not going to be fair, and there's questionnaires, and the judges are very good about weeding that out. I actually have no problem thinking that people are going to actually look at the facts and look at the law.
To the point that you were making before about having represented defendants who you felt were on the wrong side of essentially the Trump Justice Department, and we should note that there's very good reporting and first-person accounts by the former U.S. Attorney of the Southern District that Barr interfered to attempt to quash any further pursuit of this set of facts legally under the Department of Justice, right? Like that's on the record. This moment of the arraignment. Right, because it's just, there's something so profound happening here, too, because it's like if you grow up, when you talk about, a nation that incarcerates a higher percentage of its population than any nation on earth, and if you grow up in any major city and you watch the evening news, it's like mugshots. And a lot of times it's mugshots of young men of color. And it's like these grainy photos. It's like, those are the scary people out there. This is what a criminal looks like. These are the lawbreakers. And the whole process of the arraignment and the mugshot is about the status question.
Right.
It's about saying, like, this person is accused of a bad thing. And just the idea that the former president's going to do that is just pretty mind-blowing.
That's the word I was going to use. Yeah, and especially for the former president who has a long history of dehumanizing those around them, especially people of color, as he has with DA Bragg. He's going to go through the same process. It's going to be incredibly humiliating. He will lose, he will have no control. They will treat him, back to your status point, better than most defendants. He will not be shackled. He will not be handcuffed. He will be called sir. He will have the security detail around him. He will be released on his own recognizance. But he will go through all the other, the same paces as every other defendant that he has vilified and dehumanized.
But this is also significant because it begins the recalibration of the American psyche around former presidents. I think that for many of us, there's a split sort of faction of folks who have looked at this and all along thought this is what is supposed to happen. But then I think there's also another faction that still sort of held on to the idea, the notion that the status that we've been talking about a little bit somehow was going to shield him from what many people, even some of those people, felt was necessary accountability. And so this is the first step in that reconditioning to say, no, actually, this is what the system does, and this is how the system is supposed to work.
Well said. Andrew Weissman, Danya Perry, Charles Coleman. That was fantastic. Thank you all. I want to go now to Congresswoman